tracking no issues on the rocket. The range is green, and weather continues to look good, albeit a bit foggy.
Falcon 9 is in startup.
Confirmation that Falcon is in startup.
LD is go for launch.
And there you heard that our launch director has given the final go for today's mission. So at T-minus 37 seconds and counting, all systems are ready for the launch of Falcon 9. Let's sit back and watch as the Falcon rocket takes the ASBM mission to space.
T-minus 15 seconds. T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ignition. And liftoff of Falcon 9. Go Asbm. Vehicle pitching downrange. Chamber pressure is nominal.
That incredible view, of course, means that at T-plus 33 seconds and counting, Falcon 9 has successfully lifted off from Space Launch Complex 4 East, carrying the 2 ASBM satellites. Now, after clearing the tower, as you can see a little bit on your screen
Power and
here,
telemetry are nominal.
There's good confirmations that our power and telemetry on board Falcon 9 are looking good. At this point, we're gimbaling the engines on the booster to initiate a slight roll maneuver.
Vehicle supersonic.
Call out there that Falcon 9 is moving faster than the speed of sound.
Max Q.
And there's confirmation that we have passed through the period of maximum aerodynamic pressure on the vehicle. As Falcon 9 accelerates through the thicker, lower atmosphere, the air density decreases, but we're picking up speed as we head to space, which means we're shifting the pressure balance on the rocket as we ascend. When Falcon 9 passes through max Q, the point of maximum aerodynamic pressure on the vehicle, the air density has now lowered faster than the increasing speed of the vehicle. Great views there as Falcon 9 continues on its way to space. Now, coming up shortly, we'll have 3 events in quick succession, and we should hear all of these called out by Mission Control, starting with MECO, followed by stage separation, and then SES-1. Main engine cutoff, or MECO for short, will shut down all 9 M1D engines on the first stage to slow the vehicle down in preparation for stage separation, which is when the first and second stages of Falcon 9 separate from one another. After stage 1 shuts down its engines and separates from the second stage, the booster will begin to make its way back to land. And the second engine will undertake SES-1, or Second Engine Start 1, where we light the MVAC engine on the second stage for the first time. Let's keep an eye out for all of these events happening in just about 5 seconds.
MECO.
Stage separation confirmed.
Impact startup.
Awesome views and confirmation that we have had main engine cutoff, stage separation, and of course, second engine start 1. So the next major call out we're looking for is fairing separation. Right now, the fairing is protecting the ASBM payloads from the environments on ascent. But once we reach the vacuum of space, they're no longer needed. So at that point, the halves separate and are jettisoned away.
Fairing separation confirmed.
Great confirmation and views of fairing separation on your screen there. We will, of course, be attempting to retrieve those fairing halves once they fall back to Earth with our recovery vessel Go Beyond, which is also currently standing by in the Pacific Ocean. Coming up here in just a little bit more than 2 minutes, we are anticipating entry burn, which should last about 20 seconds for our first stage booster. But right now, of course, on your screen at T plus 4 minutes and 3 seconds into this launch, you have great views of your MVAC engine on the right-hand side of the screen, taking the Asbm satellites to their intended orbit. The next major milestone we're tracking for the first stage is the entry burn, which should begin at T plus 6 minutes and 22 seconds. To start the entry burn, we will relight 3 of the M1D engines on board the first stage, which is essentially similar to pumping the brakes to slow down the vehicle as it passes back into the Earth's atmosphere. That entry burn will help to reduce the heat generated from the friction of the atmosphere and reduces
Both vehicles are on
aerodynamic.
nominal trajectories.
Good confirmation there that both the first and second stages are on nominal trajectories. So as you can see on your screen at this point in the flight, the second stage is still picking up speed and heading to orbit. On the left-hand side of your screen, you have a great view down the side of Falcon 9 and 2 of those titanium grid fins just atop the booster preparing for landing. Again, the Falcon 9 first stage supporting today's mission is performing this entry approach for the 22nd time. MVAC continuing to pick up speed and altitude in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. The engines on board the first and second stage are actually quite similar, but the Merlins on the first stage are optimized for sea level. These achieve 190,000 pounds of thrust each during both ascent and descent. The MVAC engine, by contrast, has a much wider nozzle, which you can see on the right-hand side of your screen right now, and is optimized to 220,500 pounds of thrust in the vacuum of space. One of the next major milestones we're tracking here is going...
Stage 1 entry burn startup.
There's confirmation that we have entry burn startup on board our first stage on the left-hand side of your screen.
Stage 1 entry burn shutdown.
There's confirmation of entry burn shutdown on the first stage, and with that we should have just about a minute until we hear SECO 1, or second engine cutoff 1, for the MVAC engine on board the second stage. Shortly after that, we'll hear the call out for the landing burn, which is the final burn of the Falcon 9 booster.
Stage 1 FTS is saved.
Good callouts from Mission Control as first stage continues back toward Earth.
Stage 2 FTS is saved.
Stage 2 is in terminal guidance.
Good callouts from
Stage 1 transonic.
Mission Control, and with that last one, we know that Falcon 9 continues on its way back to Earth. Great views of those grid fins steering through the atmosphere as well. As a reminder, we are attempting to land this booster today on our drone ship, Of Course I Still Love You, which is currently stationed in the Pacific Ocean.
Stage 1 landing burn.
There's confirmation that landing burn has begun, and we are expecting this burn to last for about 20 seconds in total.
Nominal orbit insertion.
Landing leg deploy. Stage 1 landing confirmed.
That was a beautiful touchdown of our Falcon 9 rocket. And of course, in the midst of all that, we also heard confirmation of second engine cutoff and nominal orbital insertion from Mission Control. Great views of MVAC up there in space with our 2 ASBM satellites on board.
MVAC started.
Confirmation of SES-2. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the MVAC engine shown on your screen has a much wider nozzle than the sea-level M1D engines on board the first stage booster. That's in order to give this engine optimal thrust performance in space. At full power, MVAC is capable of 220,500 pounds of thrust in vacuum. Also, as we mentioned earlier tonight, the ASBM satellites are carrying both military and civilian payloads. The 2 satellites on board Stage 2 are ASBM-1 and ASBM-2. Confirmation of second engine cutoff 2 there from Mission Control.
Nominal orbit insertion.
And confirmation of good orbit insertion for ASBM-1 and 2, which are still currently attached to the second stage. Those 2 satellites are hosting Viasat's GX-10A and 10B Ka-band payloads, which will extend Viasat's high-speed global network across the Arctic region. In addition to the 2 Viasat Ka-band payloads, the spacecraft are also hosting payloads for the Norwegian Armed Forces, the European Space Agency, and the U.S. Space Force. These payloads include a radiation monitoring instrument built by the Norwegian company IDEAS and ESA, which will gather information about the radiation environment in orbit and inform radiation protection planning for the next generation of Galileo satellites, Europe's navigation system. An enhanced polar SATCOM recapitalization or EPSR payload is also on board for the U.S. military. And finally, an X-band payload for the Norwegian Armed Forces. With that, we have roughly 4 minutes left in this coast before arriving to our first payload deployment. Then we'll have another 5-minute coast before arriving at our second payload deployment. So for that, we'll kick it back over to the Space Tunes and see you back here at T plus 42 minutes. And welcome back. We are now just about T plus 42 minutes into today's mission, and coming up next, we have the deployment of the first ASBM satellite. Now, just a quick recap of today's mission so far. We had an on-time liftoff at 7:02 p.m. Pacific, followed by stage separation about 2.5 minutes after launch. The first stage booster then returned to Earth and successfully landed on the drone ship Of Course I Still Love You, about 8.5 minutes after takeoff. We've also had 2 successful ignitions and shutdowns of our second stage MVAC engine.
ASBM-1 payload deploy confirmed.
There we have confirmation of ASBM-1. And as a reminder, on board Stage 2 today, we had the ASBM payload, which consisted of 2 Northrop Grumman-built satellites. ASBM-1, which we just heard confirmation of deployment there, and ASBM-2. With that confirmation, we are headed back into another coast, but we'll see you back here in just about 4 minutes for the deploy of ASBM-2. Hello and welcome back to our live coverage of the Arctic Satellite Broadband Mission. We are now about T plus 47 minutes and 10 seconds into today's mission, and coming up next, we're waiting for the deployment of the second ASBM satellite. Great views from up in space, and you can see ASBM-1 over on the left-hand side of your screen. Its deployment was just about 5 minutes ago.
ASBM-2 payload deploy confirmed.
There we heard from Mission Control and have great views on our screen that we have had successful deployment of the ASBM-2 satellite. Now, with that confirmation, we will be bringing today's webcast to a close. Today's mission marks SpaceX's 360th overall mission to date and 76th mission of the year. We want to thank Space Norway for entrusting us with today's mission and all of you for joining us today. If you are interested in more launch coverage, be sure to check out spacex.com/launches for the most up-to-date information. Thanks again. We'll see you next time.